Hello, everybody. Welcome to this year's UX23. How exciting is it? I want everyone to take a look around, and if you could see what I see and see the diverse crowd, the type of people that are here from San Diego to Paris. It's such a privilege to be here in such a wonderful building and to be able to talk about all things UX today. But I want to get to know a little bit more about you. By show of hands, how many people here have ever put any monetary amount into a slot machine? 1 penny, $100, nobody's judging. Okay. One more question. How many people have done this knowing that the house always wins and that you're probably going to lose your money? I was in Vegas 2 weeks ago, and I promise you I've never been so excited to win 75 cents. But few realms in technology exude the peculiar allure of unpredictability as strikingly as slot machines, but also generative AI. Standing on divergent ends of the technological spectrum, one an algorithm abiding by set rules, the other influenced and trained by tremendous amounts of data, often, most likely, created by humans. This captivating parallel unveils itself around the elements of surprise and uncertainty. So today, we are going to be exploring the multifaceted world of psychology, user interactions, and the human curiosity and spirit that always looks to pursue the limits of possibility. So both AI and slot machines tantalize with this allure of entertainment, engagement, a sense of discovery, but of course, why did we put the dollar in the machine? The allure of financial reward. Now, slot machines offer that potential for more of an immediate reward, while AI and generative AI is used in services and predictive analyses across various domains like stocks, sports, maybe sports betting, market analyses, business processes, all aiming to capitalize on opportunities, optimize strategies, and ultimately achieve financial gain. But both AI technologies and slot machines carry inherent risks. The risk of misuse, overuse, over-reliance, dependency, and financial loss. Both sectors raise ethical questions around business models that prioritize profit over human well-being. So, peeling back the layers today, we're going to discern the rich interplay between technology, psychology, curiosity, and the pivotal role that UX, why we're all here today, the pivotal role that UX plays and how people engage, interpret, and derive pleasure and perplexity from these systems. And historically, UX design has sought to mask complexities in exchange for user ease. How many times have we been told, make it more intuitive? In addition to, of course, make it pop. So we stand at this crossroads right now with the ascendancy of generative AI for a much needed paradigm shift, emphasizing not just user-friendliness, but the absolute critical need to empower people, increase human knowledge. Our talk today will introduce the notion of intentional friction in user interactions to give people the time and the tools to dissect and better understand AI processes. How do we harmonize the balance between interfaces that are intuitive, but also informed interactions? We'd like to envision a future where technology is less of an enigmatic output, but instead intentionally designed with the goal to empower people and help them in their decision-making and in understanding the risks in engaging in both systems of their everyday lives. How do we enable people to be able to question, contest, challenge, and provide a feedback loop to AI. So unlike slot machines, they are not just a passive player, but an active participant, contributing and collaborating with AI. The future isn't just about mitigating or alleviating cognitive burdens. It's about elevating and increasing human capability. I am now going to hand it to one of my favorite UX researchers, the brilliant Hayley Mortin, to ground us in the current state of general affairs in generative AI.
Thank you so much, Dai. And thank you, HEC, for having us here. How's the mic situation? Can you hear me okay? Love it. So when it comes to generative AI, the sense of unpredictability really comes down to image generation and text generation. And I remember around this time last year, DALL-E Mini was first released. And that was a really special time, especially for those of us who were on Twitter, because there were all kinds of strange and unpredictable and dreamlike images that were kind of coming out of this time. Every click of the generate button felt like a bit of a dive into enigmatic artistic territory. So I thought I would share a couple of my favorites from this. We had Cucumber Connect 4, a cash dispenser dispensing lettuce, not quite as exciting as money, and perhaps my favorite, a bottle of ranch dressing testifying in court. He looks pretty guilty, I don't know. But even with the best of prompts, we can have these systems predict or behave in these very unpredictable and surprising ways. So I'd like us all to indulge a very quick experiment. I'd like everyone to close their eyes. And with absolute clarity in your mind's eye, I would like you to imagine a salmon swimming in a river. All right? Hold that image in your mind, really feel it. And you can go ahead and open your eyes. Someone on Twitter said this must be what a bear sees. So I don't know how many of us were thinking of like a fillet of salmon like we see at a grocery store. But what I love about this is that it's still technically true, but it's just not what we would have predicted. It's not what we would have anticipated. So the more complex and the more impressive that things like generative AI become, the more it invites in these new and unpredictable behaviors. But the reward does outweigh the risk, and it does for 67% of senior IT leaders, 33% of which have named generative AI as a top priority this year. And that is a massive number of leaders that are placing their bets on generative AI, hoping for that jackpot of innovation or streamlined business processes. So, how can we harness this remarkable power of generative AI without effectively inviting a slot machine into our boardrooms, our labs, our classrooms? And this is a UX conference after all, so it shouldn't be shocking that I would argue the differentiating factor from an unpredictable gambling experience lies in its user interface design. So the design of a slot machine intentionally minimizes user agency, leaving the players in this sort of push and pray model. However, when we have a well-designed generative AI system, we can empower users to make informed decisions about their outputs, shifting that passive participation to active agency. And while unpredictability may be associated with these sort of negative connotations, we think of people losing their life savings and putting their bets on these things coming out dry, it's important to note for those of us that put our hands up earlier that there is a sense of excitement and anticipation in the way that these machines are designed. So I'll pass it back to Dai to walk us through some of the things we can learn about generative AI design from the way that slot machines are built.
Talking about an excitement. Hello, Mike. Hello, Mike. Hello. There we go. I think it's, this is the power.
This is the power.
This is the power. There we go. Talking about excitement, I was going to say when I won the 75 cents and I saw the lights, I was like, ah! And then people thought I had won $10,000. And someone came to me and I was like, oh no, 75 cents, but a win is a win. A win is a win. So yes, slot machines, despite their manipulative connotations, harbor valuable design insights. They are powered by entire industries of psychology, design, and research, fueling, of course, to prolong play and spending, but there are design insights that we could apply to generative AI. One being around the immediate feedback and clear outcomes. So slot machines have their status and outcomes information readily available. It is very clear, based on the symbols, what is a win and what is a loss. And AI could adopt this by not just allowing the user to understand what is happening through the generation process, but what type of data and what inputs are affecting outputs. Going even a step further, what if AI could help the person enhance their prompt and engage and educate the user on how to best interact with the system? This enhances not just the user's capabilities, but also helps to set realistic expectations on what the system can and cannot do. There's the idea of progressive disclosure. There are many slot machines catered to those that are more low risk, myself, penny and quarter slots included. And then there's also methods where certain games start building towards more complex games, where you can win the potential $1,000 or jackpot. AI systems can use the just-in-time method to slowly progress users to more advanced capabilities, allowing them to understand the steps and the things that it takes to succeed with the system, but also to mitigate overwhelming feelings. Safeguards. Many casinos will put gambling signs across the casino in addition to showing some of the odds of winning, and also where to get help if addiction does become the case. AI applications have these mechanisms where they could warn or restrict users, potentially of misuse, or also provide safeguards and instructions to not provide private or sensitive data. Taking it a step further, as design practitioners, we can build those safeguards into our design and build the models and build the type of processes where if certain data that should not be collected could also be anonymized and scrubbed. There's a constant debate and conversation between privacy and safety and so forth. And inherently, any data that is collected can also be stolen, can also be leaked. So as practitioners, when we are conducting US research, when we are trying to recruit participants, what are the safeguards that we are putting in place to protect their identities and their data? And then there's transparency. While slot machines are opaque by nature, there are many regulations and rules and policies being put in place, like for example in the UK and in Finland, where the theoretical return to player RTP percentage has to be available to the player and updated monthly. So it's really truly important to note here that many of these safeguards and transparency and governance mechanisms that I have mentioned were done so with government intervention and policy. And we're slowly starting to see this happen much more with AI, which is needed. But AI systems can take these governance and safety measures all the way back to the beginning when we start planning the AI product and really think about how we can provide insights on how certain decisions are made. How can we communicate transparency to end users on how their input data affects outputs? And many of these adaptations are not just to safeguard people, but to really create a more aware, informed, and discerning digital populace. They say the best way to predict the future is either to build it or to look to the past. So Hayley will now take us on a trip to looking at past design patterns and how we need to evaluate them for emerging technologies. I now hand the power to you.
Thank you so much for the power bestowed upon me. And I promise I won't walk us through too long of a history lesson, but I do think it's important to note that over the last 60 years, the dominant design philosophy that's prevailed has been around concealing underlying technology. So these must be some familiar faces, some familiar titles. The progression of ergonomics to Apple's first GUI in the 1980s, starting to use language about desktops and trash bins, things that are familiar to us, things that make accessing things that are previously behind a command line easier for people like you and me. And designers that most of us are familiar with, Don Norman, Nielsen Norman, Stephen Krug, these are the champions of simplicity, invisibility, and eliminating friction in the user experience. And they emphasize the idea that great technology should be made, or technology should be made invisible to be great. So this has obviously stemmed so much innovation, but do these patterns still apply to a probabilistic system? This has worked phenomenally for the deterministic systems of the past. So in the relentless pursuit of simplification, this can sometimes diminish user agency. Encouraging designers to create interfaces that don't make us think, these can lead to designs that exploit cognitive biases and shortcuts. And this is so tantamount to what we have to be thinking about with generative AI. So Dai is going to walk us through a little bit of these more extreme examples. The power is yours.
I feel like, has anybody ever watched wrestling back when it was WWF or WWE? I felt like I just got tagged into a match. I was like, oh, let's go. But dark patterns, not new to design. They've been around ever since software and systems have wanted to motivate people to conduct certain actions, are deceptive design tactics, not always intentionally done to be so. Sometimes they're just design practices that we are trying to appease stakeholders or businesses or the business values. But dark patterns reference these deceptive design tactics meant to motivate a user towards an unintentional action. Now, for example, hidden costs. Everything seems fine until you go to check out and then you realize the cleaning fee and the service fee, not just taxes, outweigh that of the cost of the even stay. Airbnb is notorious for this. And maybe many of you experienced this traumatic event as I did, trying to buy Taylor Swift tickets, Era Tour, where AI's dynamic pricing, bots, and the service fee left me with the sad experience of not having Taylor Swift tickets. But in AI, these deceptive design tactics, these patterns, become even more insidious. So for example, with hidden data collection in AI, we talk about privacy, and there's often thoughts about considering what data is being collected. But large language models that are meant to craft unique and individual experiences, require monumental amounts of data. And sometimes that means process mining, tracking, understanding and analyzing user behavior, and doing so without the user's awareness. Maybe they did click through the privacy statement way too fast. That in itself is a deceptive design pattern. And going beyond that, there's not a conscious consideration to provide transparency to the user on how long are we collecting this data for? What do we use it for? What happens when our product, our entity, our business no longer exists, but the digital footprint of this person's user behavior, their data, the collection on a specific demographic outlives our technology, outlives our flesh and bone? And then there's AI-powered persuasion. We're talking about monitoring behavior. What if at a certain moment, you could persuade someone to make a decision in a moment of weakness? So for example, someone is searching symptoms of an illness, and an AI could generate an ad where at the opportune time with the specific keywords and just the right type of messaging could influence someone to purchase a medical plan, healthcare, things that don't work, things that haven't been vetted, things that are purely for profit. That is more nefarious, but there's also other instances where it might increase consumerism. I did not know I needed a meat dehydrator so I could save money on beef jerky. But thank you, Instagram. Here I am now trying to dehydrate ribeye and deer meat. And then there's the emphasis on AI's authority. Without an informed and discerning digital populace, we have individuals who may not have the information they need to discern on whether an AI's recommendation is good or not, or the right decision to make. So the dark pattern here is that products and people can put an overemphasis on AI's authority and even discourage people from seeking more information or vetting the data themselves. And then there's the opaque nature of AI algorithms, making it very difficult to understand the cost of the service. I knew when I put 25 cents in that machine, I'm paying 25 cents and potentially $50 more. But the reward, the risk of the reward was worth it. People who use free AI services may not understand that they are paying with their data. So in addition to dark patterns, there are other major considerations for designing for AI. And one is on navigating the spectrum of truth. And this is something we haven't even solved for external to AI. And this challenge in mitigating hallucinations. So hallucinations in the context of generative AI refers to the erroneous or unexpected outputs that may not align with reality or expected patterns, often manifesting in things that may seem absurd to some. But as Hayley shared earlier, the salmon floating, not swimming if we're being technical, down the river to the bear, that might be correct and true enough. So it's essential to recognize that categorizing AI outputs as right or wrong may oversimplify realities beyond mathematical domains. Because outside of math, there are very few truths. And for instance, we can use the example of a historical event. AI may produce an interpretation of that event, while accurate to some, may be contentious or very insensitive to others. We see that in social media and media today with world affairs and world conflicts that are very complex beyond even our own societal rules. So with generative AI, this potential for hallucinations adds to this complexity of technical correctness assessments. Because how individuals perceive truth is very dependent on their social circles, their educational background, their culture, perspectives. This is mirrored in the legal systems. Laws that are meant to be absolute require historical precedents and can vary through jurisdictions when in the courtroom. And also may vary depending on the political party that is currently in office. And then there's the over-reliance, the risk of over-reliance on the technology itself. So over-reliance in AI refers to it actually mirrors the excessive engagement with slot machines. Just as a captivating spin may lure someone from spending 25 cents to $50, the polished interfaces, the simplified interfaces of AI may lure people into a false sense of trust. Hayley now will walk us through the secret sauce that we've been building towards. And that is designing with intentional friction and why that is needed for AI.
Thank you so much. So intentional friction, this is by no means a new concept in UX. It's been around for a while. It's not something that necessarily came out because of generative AI, but it's something that we should really consider when we're building out these unpredictable tools. So to give you an example, I'm sure many of us have been saved by this pop-up that comes up on Outlook or Gmail when you try to send something with an attachment and there is no PDF to be found. But this is an example of intentional friction. It's anything that stands in the way of a user experience from someone completing a task and creates an intentional pause. But why would we want to introduce this in the context of generative AI? We want to create that space to allow for reflection and allow for contemplation on the multiplicity of these outputs. As Di mentioned before, they can be complicated or truthy feeling. But AI shouldn't confidently and readily present its work like a mathematician. It should be more akin to a curator who is walking you through a multiple complex environment, understanding of context and understanding that truth is subjective. So in order to do that, we need to create these moments of reflection in the experience. So I want to ground us in a more curatorial example of what this could look like in an interface. So how many of us have put a request or something into ChatGPT in this room? That's
So many.
A lot of folks. It's a little bit like shouting into a void, you're not really sure what you're going to get back. And you can only hope that the way that you worded your prompt will give you the result that you want. And it's similar to that push and pray model of the slot machine, where instead, if your prompt needs to be worded in just the right way to hit that AI jackpot. So instead of your prompt disappearing into the abyss of ChatGPT, imagine you having more opportunity to control and refine your prompt. So this is a great example that's currently on the Nielsen Norman Group website. And they allow you to take a moment to adjust your prompts through an artificial intelligence feedback loop. It's this key moment of human-machine collaboration. And it allows you to pause before submitting your response into these more complex black boxes, really thinking about how to refine it to get what you want. Things like ChatGPT and Bard, they work perfectly well without things like this. I mean, we've all in this room, we've used it before, we've seen it happen before our eyes. But things like this allow our responses to be a little bit less of a gamble. And I want to quote Anna Cox's Kai paper, Design Frictions for Mindful Interactions. If we have these moments of intentional friction within our own generative AI experiences, they will disrupt mindless automatic interactions, prompting moments of reflection and more mindful interaction. And we can build this into experiences even before you start using the tool. So we can shine a spotlight onto a model's limitations and biases before we even start engaging with it. It's sort of like saying, hey, there's a black box that exists. We don't need to go into the complexities or give our users a data science 101 lesson. It's more about grounding them in the reality of the unpredictability of the machine they're about to engage with. We can draw a parallel to the signs we see in casinos. They say, think, what are the odds of hitting the jackpot? It's not telling us how the slot machines work. It's just grounding us in the reality of what's the likelihood of us getting a jackpot? So even the most brilliant and talented data scientists in the world, they can't even describe with certainty how certain results have come to be. So it's really about pointing out and demystifying the underlying technology and unpredictability of the machine. So back to generative AI. These similar warnings and these safeguards, they promote a more responsible and critical usage of generative AI tools, ensuring that users don't attribute magical powers to generative AI, but instead approach it with an informed curiosity and healthy dose of skepticism. And if we consider our traditional usability evaluation metrics, we often set efficiency metrics as the gold standard. So things like time on task, number of clicks, or maybe you've been asked by a stakeholder to benchmark the improvement of those things to demonstrate value. But like I mentioned before, our design principles are shifting, and our success metrics of these things need to shift as well. They need to evolve too. So these time-based metrics might become less relevant with the emergence of generative AI. In introducing things like intentional friction and pauses, these things might even increase time on task at the beginning of an experience anyway. So the question is no longer, can the user complete the task efficiently, but instead, does this user feel empowered to make informed and critical decisions? So as UX practitioners, we have a very large but very exciting responsibility on our hands. The experience and public perception of generative AI is mediated through the interfaces that we consume it with. And it's up to us to advocate for this more thoughtful and slow consumption of generative AI outputs. And Nielsen Norman, on their website, they recently stated that we're witnessing the first paradigm shift in 60 years in user experience. That's a very massive undertaking. So I'll pass the power back to Dai to walk us through how we can start to approach this shift.
I want to share a metric from Statista. In 2021, very significant year, we're coming off of the peak of the pandemic. Feels like a fever dream at this point, and hard to believe it's 4 years ago. But 2021, the gambling, casino, and online gaming industry reached a staggering market size of $231 billion US dollars. $231 billion US dollars. That is a lot of beef jerky. And yet the AI industry, valued at $100 billion, is at the mark to grow into an even greater revolution. It is estimated by 2030, which surprises me to say this, is only a little over 6 years away. It is estimated to grow by 20-fold. $2 trillion. So much. From the bright lights of Las Vegas to the digital landscapes, the gambling industry has birthed entire industries and iconic cities. Yet we stand at the precipice of another seismic shift, a technological renaissance that is set to impact humanity in an unprecedented way. And the mantle of accountability exceeds that of the gambling industry alone. While the repercussions of gambling and slot play, we make that comparison and we joke about the wins and losses, but the repercussions of that are confined to the individual alone. Think about the power of AI in the hands of one individual. The repercussions could reverberate across communities almost in an instant. So the future's trajectory hinges on the conversations and collaborations we have with one another, like the ones we're going to have today from cross-functional perspectives. It's the conscious choices we make, the collective efforts we invest. Each one of us, you, holds a piece of this responsibility in their hands. Now, I promised Hayley I would not quote Uncle Ben from Spider-Man and be all like, with great power comes great responsibility, but it's true, and I'm sorry, Hayley, I did it. But UX design and research become the linchpin of this narrative. As AI exponentially grows between users and technology, the people and technology, the UX deeply influences how people not just adopt and engage, but how these technologies are received and integrated into society. Ultimately, the role of UX is to guide the ethical and responsible digital transformative touch onto the world. So with that, I would like to close with my actual favorite quote from Dr. Fei-Fei Li, brilliant scientist. Artificial intelligence is the extension of human intelligence, not the substitution of it, and is the collective efforts of brilliant minds working in unison that will pave the way for AI to truly augment and benefit and augment humanity. We cannot thank you enough for allowing us to share our passion with you, and we look forward to the extended conversations that we will have with each and every one of you. Thank you. Thank you.
Merci. Thank you very much, Hayley. Thank you very much, Dai.
Thank you.
We have maybe 1 or 2 questions.
Oh, yes.
Is anyone in the room want to ask something? Yeah, Krista. We have some mic on the side. Can someone? Yeah. I'm alone, so I'm gonna get it.
Trying to find you.
Yeah, it's hard.
I can yell. It was a very, very interesting speech. Very rich, and the thoughts were also very interesting. I was curious. Merci. I was curious to know how, if you can provide us some examples of how this translates into your products.
Yes.
How do you apply your concepts, and especially the intentional intrusion?
Yeah, intentional friction.
How does that translate into your products? Because,
for example, when we're looking at the generative AI capabilities, whether that is through open source libraries, something we're creating on our own, that conscious effort takes place before the model even takes place. And I will answer your question. This is slightly indirect, but because we're in a room of researchers and designers, I really want to emphasize this. When we start doing market analysis, competitive analysis, is your sample diverse? Does it represent non-technical populi? When you're conducting user testing and your heuristic evaluations, are you protecting the identity and data of your participants? When you are recruiting, are you testing it with people with different technical literacies, abilities, and so forth? So this comes at a discussion before a product concept even takes place. And then within the product itself, when we start thinking about, for example, recommendations being generated to a person, making the clear principle within your organization to say, hey, anytime AI is present, we are going to let people know that this recommendation, this piece of text, this suggestion, the bot that they are talking to is generated by AI. And potentially even taking that further when we start working with like applied sciences and researchers and data scientists, making standardized processes to really be transparent as possible. And none of this is perfect. Everyone is still racing to implement this, and it's still really challenging to move Goliath companies like ServiceNow. But for example, things like model cards. So model cards are like fact sheets, nutrition labels, but for your models, urging teams to start exposing the data that they're using to train models. The biggest thing that if I could leave with nothing else and you forget that I won 75 cents, but you could remember this, it would be when you are talking to your stakeholders, be intentional and start getting involved on the data collection side, on the data science side. Make sure that the data they're using to train the models reflect that of the populace that you intend to use your technology. Hayley, if you want that.
Oh, I mean, just to the like intentional friction point, being on a research team, there is so much effort that goes into how often should we tell our users that they're engaging with AI? Should that be a one-time notification, multiple times? What language do we want to use when we introduce this to our customers? That's just a whole user research project kind of waiting to happen. And so those are the types of things and types of undertakings that on an AI research team, like those are the questions that we're typically asking.
And then talking about the language part, when we have large language models, there's over 2,000 languages in the world, but only 20 roughly are represented in large language model data sets. So when you're using these technologies, being conscious, like, is there an erasure of a culture taking place in a place that you're deploying technology and so forth? Please like and subscribe. We'd love to do this again and we could talk about this for days. Oh, thank you. We were so verbose, we didn't even get to answer all the questions.